This is going to be has to be the greatest scandal of modern times in Ireland, because we're just actually a year on from the news that a little boy called Kyran Durnin was missing, presumed dead, with no authorities realising he had disappeared off the face of the earth for a number of years. And here we are, Gardaí are searching an area of open land in North Dublin, investigating what happened to a young boy who appears to have been vanished without being reported missing. Now, the resources of a homicide inquiry are being put into this. The child was 3 or 4 years old when last seen, which appears to be in and around 2020.
In or around
21?
20, well, maybe, sometime in the last 4 years, basically, and probably 21. I mean, amazingly, the coincidence being that the referral was made by TUSLA for this child on the August the 29th, which is the exact anniversary of Kyran Durnin being reported missing. Now, what seems to have happened in this case is that it was flagged to TUSLA basically as a result of a social welfare claim. If the child was alive, the child would now be 7, but he went missing sometime in or around the age of 3.5, so about 3.5 years ago, one way or another. Like, as you said, I mean, the case of Kyran Durnin, which we know more about because it's more developed, like, it is an unacceptable thing to be able to happen in modern Ireland. Kyran Durnin in particular had been, he'd been known to social services, and, they should have been able to trace him. Now, this case...
I suppose, just to recap, he would be 9 years old now. He was officially reported missing in August of last year, and a murder investigation was launched the following October. Gardaí believe he might have died aged about 6. After some investigation, they discovered that he hadn't been seen since May of 2022, when he was a pupil at a primary school in Dundalk. And they are still investigating that. There's been a number of searches conducted, and as an individual who was a person of interest has since died in relation to that case. But they're no further in finding this child's body or what happened. There was a big, as you say, this other child was sort of discovered to be missing on the anniversary of Kyran's, of the missing report, basically. Which is many years after they believe he was dead. But there was a lot of publicity around that. I think it was utilised as a kind of a jog your memory exercise for the public. We're a year on since this story broke and still no closer to finding the body. And obviously discovering the truth of what happened. And there was a lot of, pictures released of Kyran and newspaper articles and, interviews on media, radio, broadcast, etc. It's just extraordinary. And both cases are not within the same exact area, but not far from one another.
Not far from one another. Obviously, in the case of Kyran Durnin, as you said, a guy called Anthony Maguire was arrested, and he was questioned. Nothing of evidential value was gleaned from that investigation, but he subsequently took his own life. And that certainly... there's certainly no more information to be gotten out of him, and that will hamper the investigation, let's put it that way.
Having said that, texts going back a number of years and phone communication between two individuals are being investigated now in regards to that.
And of course, any statements that have been made to Gardaí, they'll be checking for inconsistencies, all of that information. But I mean, this case obviously it's just TUSLA been made aware of it on the 29th of August, so we're just a few days in. But what we do know so far is that there's been nobody has seen the child since he was somewhere between the age of 3 and 4. He never attended school, so he was never registered. He now would be 7 years old. We know he was living in apartments called the Gallery Apartments in Donabate, which would be in North County Dublin, as you said, a bit away, but in the general direction of where Kyran Durnin had been living. We know that the guards have already, at this point, a few days in, have spoken to a number of relatives of the child. Some of those relatives are...
I think they've spoken to the parents of the child.
They've spoken to the parents of the child.
One of whom is abroad and one of whom is still in Ireland. And they've been given information that has led them to suspect that this child was unlawfully killed.
Now, as you said, they have the resources of a homicide investigation, and what that means is that they can have warrants to seize, for example, phone records or anything of that sort. In searching for a missing person, the guards it'd be much more complicated to get that sort of information. So, like the investigators at this point, they're not ruling anything in or out in terms of how the child has died, but that could include an accidental death, but that could also include a murder or another type of violent death. There isn't
Well, until they discover a body and a post-mortem can be conducted, they will always have to keep an open mind as such. But they're basically looking at two possible scenarios: that the child was killed and has been buried, or that the child died naturally and for some reason somebody buried the child on a piece of land, didn't report the child dead, and that is also obviously a criminal offence. So one way or another. But I mean, it's hard to imagine any of these things, but it's very hard to imagine a 3 or a 4-year-old boy dying in natural circumstances and an adult human being deciding it was a good idea to bury them on wasteland.
Yeah, I mean, it would be, it would just not happen. I mean, there's children die, accidental deaths, very tragic deaths all the time. People, in that normal course of events, the absolutely normal thing to do would be to report it straight away to Gardaí and
ring an ambulance. All the rest of it.
Exactly. Phone the emergency services. For a child to die and then be buried, that isn't a normal thing. And of course, then, as you said, without a body, there's no cause of death, and guards then keep an open mind about what would have happened. But clearly, this isn't a normal way to react to an accidental death. Now, there's searches...
So the discovery of all this came to light due to social welfare payments.
Yeah.
And they were related to the child. So it's obviously the children's, the welfare allowance.
Well, you would think so, yeah,
okay.
Of course.
So what happens in that case is that is paid automatically. But every now and then, I don't know whether it is sporadic, it's every year, it's every 3 years or whatever, social welfare will write to the parents claiming this, looking for proof that, the children are basically where they should be.
Yeah.
So, for example, you might get a document from social welfare, which you'll have to send to the school to have it stamped.
Yeah.
On official school stamp to show that the child is in school.
Yeah.
If this little boy was still alive, he would have been 7, he should have been in school. Perhaps that's the sort of thing that has come. It appears that no proof that the boy was alive was provided in order to secure these social welfare payments or of him having attended school.
Yeah.
So this is how it was discovered. And from our understanding, TUSLA began to investigate this, and a woman was interviewed about the boy.
Yeah.
And she has made certain claims during those interviews, which were then, that he was killed by another person.
Yeah.
And obviously that his remains were buried on this waste ground. The Gardaí were then...
they would be informed,
were informed of that. And that this is how TUSLA basically confirmed it, made a referral to Garda Síochána in relation to their now concerns about his safety and well-being. And thus this sort of investigation has been launched, which hasn't as yet been called a homicide, but which has been resourced as such.
Yeah.
So everyone is slightly playing with words here.
Everyone is playing with words because, of course, you get one person has told, given the Gardaí information, as you said, but all of that has to be verified, and somebody would give information from their own perspective, let's put it that way. So it is a huge, it's an incredible that the timing of it comes on the back of the Kyran Durnin case. I mean, the Kyran Durnin case, that a child known to the state could fall out of the system like he did, it is an incredible scandal. Now, we heard somebody from Tanya Ward from the Children's Rights Alliance speaking today on the radio, and she was speaking about how this could have occurred as a result of the lockdowns. Sometimes children were in the system and instead of the normal interaction that the state might have with a family, because things occurred during the lockdowns, that didn't happen. People weren't coming into offices. People weren't being visited in whatever way.
The lockdowns are a long time away. I mean, you'd imagine that they'd have followed up after lockdown and done what needed to be done if a child was on their radar. You
absolutely would. I mean, that doesn't, and I don't, in fairness, I don't think Tanya Ward was suggesting that's an excuse or an explanation, an excuse, but she was saying that's an explanation where some of these things fell through the system. Norma Foley has also come out and
she's basically said, I'm deeply concerned about this missing child. Uppermost in my thoughts is the welfare of this child, and she appealed for anyone with information to provide it to An Garda Síochána. Those searches are continuing, and we will undoubtedly be returning to this story later in the week as the Gardaí search those lands.
As the Gardaí search the lands. But I mean, like, let's not, you can talk about crimes that we discuss on Crime World, but this is not something that should be normal, that children can go missing.
You certainly didn't expect to be speaking about another child missing.
Absolutely not.
A 3 or 4 year old disappearing off the face of the earth and nobody caring to, report it or to notice.
Exactly.
To notice, you certainly wouldn't have expected to be speaking about a story so quickly in relation to the Kyran Durnin one, and how shocking that was and has been and continues to be. But look, it is something that we'll be coming back to. So let's return to this later in the week as it develops.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.